Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Now, it has been a hot minute since I have done any kind of reading wrap up on this channel, but I definitely want to get back to doing them for each month, especially now that I'm back to doing my TBR videos. So, today we are going to talk about all the books that I read in July. And I've said several times on this channel that an average reading month for me is normally 15 or more books. But I will give the disclaimer that if I read longer books, that isn't necessarily the case. So I am going to say that I completed 10 books in July, but there is a little asterisk next to that because I do have to explain about two of them. But a lot of the books that I read in July were longer than the books that I typically pick up. So I was averaging like 600 or more page books, where I would say normally the books that I'm picking up are about 400 to 500 pages, and some of them were just a little slower paced. But all of that is to say, obviously, quality over quantity. And I do feel like the 10 books that I read were well worth taking my time and enjoying instead of trying to rush and get more books finished during the month. So, the caveat that I'm giving, the little asterisk on those two books, is that two of the books that I actually finished like August 2nd, but I did the majority of the reading for those two books in July. So I wanted to go ahead and talk about them now since I'm filming this after having completed those two books. But I did just want to explain that I just finished like maybe the last 10% of those two books technically in August. So on my reading wrap up, they won't look like they're in July if I'm actually looking at any of my apps or journals. But to me, I feel like I read them in July because I did read the majority of those two books in July. So we'll talk about both of those today. But I do want to go in chronological order. So let's start way back at the beginning of the month. So the first book that I finished this month was Nuclear War, a Scenario by Annie Jacobsen. And if you're not familiar with this book, Nuclear War literally takes you through every minute and hour of a scenario where nuclear war takes place. So, for example, the United States is hit by an unexpected nuclear bomb, and then how the United States would react to that, and what the fallout would be of an eventual nuclear war. Now, I listened to this on audiobook, and I did not rate this book because it is kind of a nonfiction. It's almost written like a published research paper where the author talks about her sources and the people that she interviewed and the information they were allowed to share based on their NDAs and agreements. And honestly, I think if you're interested in this type of book, I would recommend it. But personally, I feel like this was not great for my mental health to listen to this book and really understand the process of what it would take for the United States to launch nuclear weapons and understanding the individuals who have their hands on those codes right now and the way that they seem to be making some pretty irrational decisions. So, personally, I didn't rate this and I'm not going to rate this, but I will just say if that's something that you feel like you might be sensitive to, maybe don't pick up this book if you think it's going to negatively impact your mental health. I wanted to be more informed, and so I thought the book would be interesting to learn a few things, and I definitely did learn a few things, but I definitely would not revisit this book anytime soon, and I wouldn't revisit any of the information in it anytime soon. That is what I will say about Nuclear War, a Scenario. This book is really well revered, so if you're interested in that type of writing and you think you'll be okay with that topic, go ahead and pick it up. I don't have any complaints about the book in particular. I think just personally it was bad timing for me. And the second book that I finished in July was The Woman in the Window by AJ Finn. And I did rate this book 3 stars. And just a reminder that a 3 star rating is not bad. It just means that it was a good book. It probably won't stick with me. It wasn't super impactful. So, The Woman in the Window is about a woman who has experienced a traumatic event and she is agoraphobic. So, she stays inside her home, and if she attempts to leave for any reason, she feels extremely panicked. And our main character in this book is a psychologist, and she goes on a website where she talks to other people who have agoraphobia and tries to help them. And there's also, of course, lots and lots of other layers that happen in the book. So the real plot sets off because our character really watches people outside of her windows. She's not able to leave her house, and so you oftentimes see her looking out of the windows through her camera lens and zooming in on people, taking pictures of people, which in itself is extremely creepy, but that's kind of where the story starts. So she gets some new neighbors and then she witnesses a crime happening out of her window and chaos ensues from there. I thought that this was pretty well done, except I felt that everything was pretty predictable from start to finish. I didn't really feel shocked by any of the twists and turns, and I was definitely suspicious of the correct people throughout the book. I will say that this book did a good job of making everyone seem extremely suspicious and like they would be capable of being the culprit of a bad thing. The book definitely made you question alongside the main character as she was being gaslit if she had seen what she had seen and what had happened. So I would say if you're looking for just a quick turn your brain off, enjoyable thriller, this would be a great option for you. And honestly, it wasn't bad. Like I said, a 3-star rating just means that it was good and it probably won't be impactful for me. So I would say don't be discouraged by the fact that I rated it 3 stars. If you're somebody who doesn't care if you're able to put the puzzle pieces together, then this probably would be great for you. If you're not worried about trying to guess how things are going to end and being able to easily unravel that, then you'll probably be fine. I, for one, have a really hard time being surprised by books, so I'm really looking for mysteries and thrillers that keep me on the edge of my toes and keep me guessing. And so that's the reason that this didn't rate higher for me. I felt like it was very similar to a lot of other thrillers and mysteries that I've read, although I definitely did like the writing and I will try more from this author. So that was how I felt about The Woman in the Window. And up next, I joined a new book club, which, if you've been here for a while and you saw my reading journal setup video, then you would know that I have been a member of several different book clubs and I've definitely taken a step back on a lot of those. I haven't been participating as much as I was previously so that I could focus more on mood reading, especially when I was in my reading slump. But this one is actually in person with a much smaller group of people, and I'm really enjoying being engaged in that. So, the book that the members of the book club had picked for July was Shield of Sparrows by Devney Perry, which is a relatively new fantasy series that has come out. And this was book one in the series. So, this was really the start of my like long books for the month because this one is almost 700 pages. And I found this one interesting. There wasn't ever any point where I felt like I was having a hard time getting through the book, but I did just kind of have a sense of like, been there, done that. It felt very similar to a lot of other fantasies and romanticises that have come out recently. And I definitely think there's a pattern that a lot of authors are following when they're wanting to publish romanticy books. But that being said, I liked Devney Perry's writing and I liked some of the portions of the story, and the ending definitely sold me on continuing the series. And I did rate that 3.5 stars. So, definitely an enjoyable read, a pretty easy romantasy read if you're interested in that. I think I'm probably just a little burnt out on romantasy and a lot of the plot lines and tropes that many people are putting into their newly published romantasy books. And the next book that I read for July was The Three Body Problem, And if you don't know, The Three Body Problem is actually on Kindle Unlimited, and it's been on there for a while. It is also part of a Netflix series, but I personally haven't interacted with that or seen any of it, so I'm not sure how it aligns with the book or the quality of that. But there is a series that aligns with this book series, and I personally have had this book borrowed on Kindle Unlimited for probably over a year at this point. It's kind of embarrassing. And so I finally got around to reading this. The Three Body Problem is sci fi, and I really didn't know anything other than that when I went into the book. And I was definitely blown away by where the book went. I had zero expectations, and there were points early on in the book where I was a little unsure. I didn't know where it was going to go. But by the end of the book, how everything comes together is really amazing, and how the story is pieced together really kind of floored me. So I did rate this one a 4 star because there were some times that I wasn't as engaged with the story, but I am definitely planning to continue this series, and I've already borrowed the second book in the series, so I'm hoping to continue it soon. I definitely don't want to let that one sit on my TBR for over a year, but I really, really enjoyed this. And I'm just not sharing too many of the details about the book because I think the story is a lot more interesting if you just go in completely blind. So know that it's sci-fi, it's extremely well written, and I would recommend reading it. So if you're someone who enjoys sci-fi and also wants to have that aspect of like trying to sleuth something out, this would be a really, really interesting read for you, and I definitely enjoyed that. Up next, I had the chance to get the audiobook for the first book in the Summer I Turned Pretty series on Libby because it was available as a skip the line copy. And I recently had a friend who recommended this series to me as a brain break. So if I just needed something easy to kind of turn my brain off and enjoy, she recommended this series to me. So when I saw that it was on Skip the Line, I decided to go ahead and snag that. And I would say that her description was really accurate. I do believe that this is young adult, so I kind of expected that going in, that it wasn't going to be like super high stakes or, extremely well written for like an adult audience. And I thought it was fine. I thought it was a really nice, like, summer beach read. And I'm definitely interested to see what happens with the characters moving forward. I haven't watched the show that's based on these books, but I have heard that things are pretty different. So I probably will just stick with the books for now. And I do have a hold for the second audiobook, so I will let you know how I feel continuing the series. But for now, I did rate this first one 3 stars, and I don't really have too many other feelings related to that book. I thought it was just fine for something quick and easy to read. And then after the summer I turned pretty, I was kind of interested in getting into more fantasy because Shield of Sparrows was honestly the first fantasy book that I feel like I've picked up in a while. I don't feel like I've been reading a ton of fantasy lately, and The Spell Shop has been on my TBR for a while as well. So I went ahead and read that, and I really, really enjoyed this book. I've been finding more and more lately that I really enjoy cozy fantasy. I do feel like this one had a little bit higher stakes than some other cozy fantasy, so that helped me to feel a little more engaged with the story and want to continue reading. But overall, I thought this was a really, really sweet book. I thought it was really cute. I loved all the characters, and I really enjoyed the plot from start to finish. So, definitely would highly recommend The Spell Shop, and I'm very excited for the second book by this author that is related to this series to come out. I do believe that it is a prequel that has to do with one of the characters and how they were created. So I'm really, really excited about that because I know that that ended up being a very tumultuous time. And I won't give anything away because it is part of the spell shop. So if you're interested in seeing what the second book is about, I would recommend reading the first one first because you get to know that character in modern times. but I am really excited to read the second one when it comes out, and I think it's gonna be a really nice cozy read just like the first one, and I did rate this 4 stars, so I would recommend this if you're somebody who is interested in cozier reads and you don't mind something that's a little bit cheesy. And for my next book, which was the 7th book that I completed for July, I got an ARC really, really late, so probably about a week before the book was coming out, and I wanted to make sure that I read and reviewed it by the date that it was going to be released, and that was Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson. And I have read some of Holly Jackson's other works, but this one was definitely more adult because the main character is an adult and it dealt with a little bit higher stakes, which feels weird to say because all of the books that I've read by Holly Jackson are like this type of thriller, like crime solving type of book. But I just felt like with an adult main character, things were a little bit different and framed a little bit differently. And I actually really, really appreciated that. And I really can't tell you too much about Not Quite Dead Yet, just because a pretty significant thing happens at the end of like the first chapter of the book. And that sets the pace for the rest of the book, which I thought was such a useful tactic for a thriller. It really heightened the stakes in the book, and I thought it was done super, super well. I really loved our main character and her tenacity, and I really enjoyed getting to read this book. I actually read it relatively quickly, and I just was like hooked and on the edge of my seat the entire time. Sometimes I was a little frustrated because I felt like our main character was just ignoring an obvious answer and was coming up with like as many stupid suggestions as she possibly could instead of that obvious answer. But obviously, that was necessary to continue the plot and further the book. So I don't mind a ton, but I did lower the rating just a little bit because of that. And so because of that, I did rate this a 4.5 star, but I will say this is one of my absolute favorite thrillers that I've read so far this year, and I was so, so thankful to get an art copy of this because I just like I've loved what I've read by Holly Jackson, and I was really surprised that I did receive this. So I would definitely recommend checking that out. If you're already a fan of Holly Jackson, you'll probably love it. And if you're a fan of mystery and thrillers in general, then I definitely think that you will enjoy that just like I did. And then, technically, the last book that I actually finished in July was The Night and the Moth by Rachel Gillig. And I did feature that book in my sequel to my new releases reading vlog. So I'm not going to talk too much about it now because I did provide a much more in depth review in that video. And I did rate that a 3.75 star. I just didn't really feel connected with the characters the same way I did when I read the Shepherd King duology. And I still think all the things that I love about Rachel Gillig's writing were there. All the elements needed for that recipe were there, but something just wasn't connecting with me. So overall, I did enjoy the book, but I felt like it just fell a little short of my expectations. But if you want to hear more about that, you will have to go and watch my new releases reading vlog sequel. It should only be a few videos down in the queue. And now we can talk about the two books that I didn't technically finish in July, but I did read the bulk of in July. So the first of those two was The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which is a Pulitzer Prize winner. I've had kind of a like mixed relationship with Donna Tartt. I absolutely love The Secret History. It's one of my favorite dark academia books that I've ever read. I believe when I rated that book and wrote a review of it, I said that it was easily a modern classic, and I still fully believe that. I love that book. It's still one of my favorite books that I have ever read to date. But then last year, I read The Little Friend, which is also by Donna Tartt, and I did not enjoy that book so much. I honestly was so conflicted about that book that I never rated it, and I still don't feel comfortable to give it a rating because I feel like there are some story elements that suggest one thing, but there's also some execution elements that take away from that. So I've just had a really mixed relationship with her books, but I had The Goldfinch on my TBR, and it is the last book of Donna Tartt's that I needed to read to have completed all of her work. So I felt like enough time had passed that I wasn't as worried that I was gonna be disappointed by it because of my experience with The Little Friend. And honestly, like, there were still a couple things that bothered me about The Goldfinch, but aside from that, I thought that this book was really, really well executed. I really came to enjoy the characters in this book. It was heartbreaking to watch them go through difficult things and make bad decisions, but the ending of the book and the payoff of all of that pain is so, so worth reading the book. So I would definitely recommend it. I was thankful to have enjoyed this one in comparison to my experience with The Little Friend. So I can confidently say that this and The Secret History are two really, really great books that I have read and can wholeheartedly recommend. And I did end up rating The Goldfinch 4.5 stars. And then the final book that I want to talk about in this video is Elantris. And if you're not familiar with Elantris, it was Brandon Sanderson's first published work. I don't believe it was the first book that he ever finished. I just think it was the first one that he was able to get published. I believe that it was like his 10th book or something along those lines that he had actually written, but it was the first one to officially be published. And so I have been working through the Cosmere, and I started with Mistborn Era 1, so the first Mistborn trilogy. And after that first Mistborn trilogy, I was a little bit disappointed because I really disliked the main female character in that series. My favorite character in the series isn't really in the series after the first book, which was extremely disappointing when I finished the first book and kind of realized where things were going. And then I did come to have two other characters that were really my favorites in the second and third books, but I was really disappointed in how the main female character was written and portrayed. So after reading that series, I kind of was reluctant to jump into more of his work because I felt like if women continued to be written in that way, I would be extremely disappointed and I wouldn't want to continue reading his works. But fortunately, with Elantris, which was my next book that I needed to finish in the Cosmere, that has completely changed my mind about the way that Brandon writes women. So there is a female character that is one of the main characters, if not like the main character, because she really ends up being the person who drives a significant portion of the plot. I would say that it's pretty 50-50 with who the main characters are. And she definitely restored my faith in Brandon Sanderson's ability to write women and write them well and to give them personalities that make me want to read his books. So, overall, I really enjoyed this book. I think Brandon Sanderson does an amazing job with really building out a fully fleshed out setting, a fully fleshed out plot line, and he provides such intricate details about magic systems in his books that I really, really enjoy. And I love that he's able to do all of that, but still have elements of humor and lightheartedness throughout his books. So it doesn't feel like you're just reading a tome or a dictionary when you're reading them. So overall, I did give Elantris 5 stars, and I'm definitely really excited to continue with the Cosmere. My next book that I need to read is Warbreaker. And then I believe after Warbreaker, I might get to jump into the Stormlight Archives, but I am hoping to continue to do that, at least reading one of his books per month, working through the Cosmere. So that's my plan. So hopefully, when I'm doing my August wrap up, we'll be able to talk about Warbreaker. But I just wanted to make sure that I included the Goldfinch and Elantris in here at the end because I did read the majority of both of them in July, even though I technically finished them in August. So if we're going on technicalities, technically I only finished 8 books in the month of July, but I am including these two extra for a total of 10 books because having read the bulk of them last month, I felt like it would do a disservice to the books if I waited a full month to talk to you about them in my August wrap up. So, overall, those are the 10 books that I read in July, and I really enjoyed them. I was surprised that it was a little bit like slower of a reading month for me, but I don't really feel like it was slower because I was reading quite a few larger books as opposed to shorter ones that I would get through a little bit faster. So overall, I would say that July was a great reading month, and I would say that my personal favorite, which is probably recency bias, but my personal favorite right now was Elantris, even though it is so hard to pick because I felt like I had so many good reads this month. Not Quite Dead Yet is definitely up there because I'm always looking for a thriller or mystery that I really, really enjoy. So I would say that those are probably some of my top reads of the month, but honestly, I wasn't really disappointed majorly with anything that I read. So I would love to know if you had any favorite books that you read last month during July. Pop that down in the comments, let me know. And if you've read any of these 10 books that I've read, let me know what you thought about them. I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions. But as always, thank you so, so much for watching today's video. I really appreciate your support, and I hope you have an amazing day. Bye.